When you're eyeing a premium laptop, the biggest question isn't just how fast is it, but will it actually make my workday smoother, or am I just paying for a shiny badge? That hesitation is real, especially when the price tag pushes past six figures. I've spent the last few weeks running a 14-inch Apple MacBook Pro with the M5 Max chip through a typical creator's workflow coding, 4K video editing, a little 3D rendering, and back-to-back Zoom calls just to see if the hype translates into everyday value. If you want to see the exact model details on Amazon, the link is in the description. First off, let's talk about the kind of machine we're dealing with. The high-end professional laptop market is crowded with Windows workstations that brag about raw teraflops, and then there's Apple's approach, a tightly integrated silicon plus software stack that promises to turn raw horsepower into usable speed. The M5 Max in this MacBook Pro is Apple's most powerful mobile CPU/GPU combo yet, with an 18-core CPU and a 40-core GPU. That sounds intimidating on paper, but the real question is whether those cores get used where it matters to you. If you spend a lot of time editing 4K footage in Final Cut Pro, the answer is yes. The media engine in the M5 Max offloads transcoding, and the display Apple's Liquid Retina XDR with Nano-Texture coating delivers a peak brightness that lets you see true HDR detail even on a sunny desk. In practice, my render queue for a 20-minute documentary dropped from an hour on my previous 13-inch model to under 30 minutes. The timeline never stuttered, and color grading felt immediate because the display reproduces the full P3 gamut without the typical look-ahead lag you sometimes get on other laptops. Software developers will also find a home here, especially those who run multiple virtual machines or container clusters locally. The 64 GB of unified memory means you can spin up a full-stack environment database, back-end, and a front-end server without watching the RAM meter flash red. Because the memory is shared between CPU and GPU, even graphical debugging tools run smoothly. I ran a local Kubernetes cluster with several pods and the system handled it with barely a whisper. That kind of headroom is what you need when you're compiling large codebases or doing data science work that leans on GPU acceleration. Now, let's be clear about who should think twice. If you're a casual user who mainly browses the web, streams Netflix, or does light photo edits, you'll likely be overpaying. The performance margin you'd notice over a lower-tier MacBook Pro or even a high-end Windows Ultrabook would be negligible for those tasks, and the 2 TB SSD, while generous, may sit idle. Also, the price of a custom-ordered CTO model can easily exceed $5,000. For a student or freelancer just starting out, that money could be better allocated to a monitor, a good desk chair, or even a subscription to the cloud services you'll need anyway. A practical downside that shows up after the purchase is the port selection. The 14-inch chassis gives you 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, an HDMI 2.1 output, an SDXC card slot, and a headphone jack. That's enough for most pro setups, but if your workflow relies heavily on Ethernet or you need multiple external monitors at 4K, you'll need a dongle or dock. Those accessories add to the total spend and can feel a bit clunky compared to the all-in-one connectivity some Windows workstations provide. Battery life is another nuance. Apple advertises up to 17 hours of video playback, and under light tasks like web browsing it indeed stretches close to that. However, as soon as you fire up the GPU for real-time effects or start a 4K render, the 96W charger is constantly on the hook, and you'll see the battery dip below 50% after an hour of intensive work. If you travel often and expect to unplug for half a day, you'll need to factor in that charging routine. On the plus side, the built-in audio and video conferencing gear are more than adequate for remote work. The 6-speaker array with spatial audio makes conference calls feel less tinny, and the 12-megapixel center stage camera tracks you as you move around a small home office. I tried a day of back-to-back client meetings, and the camera's autoframing kept me centered without any manual adjustment, which is a small but noticeable productivity boost. The software experience also deserves a mention beyond the hardware specs. macOS Monterey, and the newer Ventura updates, continues to refine the synergy between the OS and Apple Silicon. Things like Instant Wake, where the laptop feels instantly ready after closing the lid, and the ability to run iOS apps natively on the machine, add a layer of convenience you don't get on most Windows laptops. For creators who already use iPad apps like Procreate or LumaFusion, being able to open those same files directly on a full-size screen streamlines the workflow. Repairability, however, stays in the same Apple-style locked box. The RAM, storage, and GPU are all soldered, meaning you can't upgrade later. If you think you might need more storage or memory down the line, you have to.